Hi, it's Scott. ROCKFILE back with another podcast review. Actually, 2 in 1. I don't usually do this, but over the weekend, I watched both of the original Fantastic Four movies. The Fantastic Four from 2005 and Rise of the Silver Surfer from 2007. Let's talk about both of them. Both movies were directed by Tim Story. He directed Barbershop and a few other movies. He's actually the first African-American director to gross over $1 billion in movies. I think that's pretty huge, actually. The same people who produced the Spider-Man movies in the early 21st century and the X-Men movies in the first 21st century also produced this for 20th Century Fox. You had Jon Gruffud, however you say his name. I thought it was pretty good. Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, Michael Chiklis, Julian McMahon, who passed away over the weekend. That's why I watched both movies. And Kerry Washington. I was a big fan of Nip Tuck, and Julian McMahon was on that. And when they cast him as Dr. Doom, I thought, he could probably pull it off. And he really did a good job, considering that they really kind of made him by the time he turned into it, a mustache-twirling villain is typical. But anyway, watching both movies now, because I remember them being horrible. And most people do. These are not very well regarded, although they made decent money. Both had budgets of about $100 million. Both grossed over $300 million. So they weren't huge hits at the time, but they were hits. I got to say, of all the characters in the movies, both of them, Chris Evans comes out the best. He's a very cocky Johnny Storm and plays it perfectly. And the fact that they brought him back in the latest Deadpool was just brilliant. The one person who sticks out of all of them is Jessica Alba. She is completely miscast as Sue Storm. I read a little bit of Fantastic Four growing up. I was into the Marvel universe, not really knowing the difference between Marvel and DC when I was a kid. I preferred Doctor Strange and X-Men and things like that. And I just thought Jessica Alba was never a good choice for Sue Storm. When they first announced it, after the first movie, after the second one, it's not that she's bad in the role. She just doesn't fit the role. She does okay with what she has to do. She's kind of wooden through a lot of it and doesn't really emote as much as the character really needs. But I thought Chris Evans was fantastic. I thought Jon Gruffud, however you say his name, was really good. He's a Welsh actor, but I don't speak Welsh, or at least the accent anyway. I thought he was a pretty good Mr. Fantastic. Michael Chiklis did pretty good in the role, as Ben Grimm. And Kerry Washington as the blind girlfriend. She was fantastic in the movie, in both of the films. The first movie is longer than the second movie. The first movie takes a long time to even get to Dr. Doom. He doesn't really show up until the very end. It's more about setting the character, setting the tone, doing a few superhero type things, but there's not a lot of that in this film. This suffers from a lot of what the early X-Men movies suffer now in retrospect, or the early Spider-Man, that there just wasn't enough superhero stuff in some of those movies. And these, really not enough. Although I like what's there. Unfortunately, the Reed Richards character is really hard to do with special effects now. It was even harder 20 years ago. They really didn't do him very well. They kind of have, the lead actor, he kind of leans over something, and then they digitally do the rest of everything behind his head. And it looks as bad as it sounds, actually, to describe it. He's basically rubber and can stretch and all that kind of stuff. And just special effects really couldn't pull it off at the time. Now, Ben's costume is mostly practical, and that's great. Victor Von Doom, he's practical. Sue Storm doesn't have, And Johnny Storm, he's animated incredibly. Like, that's as good as anything today. You can see clearly Chris Evans in the flames as he slowly, these powers kind of take him over eventually. Another funny thing in the second movie, those Nuvi things that run before movies with Maria Menounos? I have no idea who she is. I mean, she looks familiar. I've watched those things for years in the theater going, why does she get this? Who is she? Well, I found out she was on some pretty big shows that I never watched, but she's the nurse in the second Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. She's the nurse that won't give Johnny the time of day, and eventually they go snowboarding and snow skiing out of a helicopter. Anyway, I thought that when I put all that together, I'm like, oh, that's it. Yeah, okay. All right, now I know who that is. The first movie being longer than the second one, I feel there's a lot cut out of the second one. Rise of the Silver Surfer does some things really good, like the Silver Surfer. He's voiced by Lawrence Fishburne, and the effects and how they bring him to life and everything, how he's, kind of a slave, so to speak, to Galactus. That's all handled really well. And I think in both movies, they handle the characters really well, although the first movie takes too long to get going. And by the end, it was just kind of a, okay, well, that was fine. And the same thing with this one. Should have been much more epic, but a fatal flaw of the film, and I'm sorry I'm getting into spoilers, but these movies have been out for 20 years, they didn't make Galactus a person. It's a big thing of cloud, like V'ger from the original Star Trek, the motion picture. And it's just a cloud thing that's going to eat the planet. Really? I mean, we get visions of his helmet in things like clouds, and when they go into the thing, you kind of get a vision of that, but there's really no character of Galactus, no giant thing. They made it a giant cloud. I think that was a mistake. Going back to the first movie, there should have been a little more superhero stuff, but otherwise, it's a fine early 2000s superhero movie where a couple of characters are slightly miscast. One is really miscast, and they did the best they could. But watching it now, I mean, it plays heartfelt, like they cared, like they weren't just kind of pooping this movie out, so to speak. And the second one, the same. I think they cared. I just think there's some stuff missing. There's a lot of stuff with Silver Surfer. There could have been more with, like, Silver Surfer and Galactus. And some of the character beats and stuff get shortchanged because they spend more time on the Silver Surfer. I think that was probably to address the first, that we didn't do as much superhero stuff. But even in the second one, Silver Surfer does a lot of stuff. The Fantastic Four, not so much. And then they introduce the car, and it breaks into 4 pieces, and they go flying everywhere, and it comes in big CG scenes. It was fine for the time, but both movies are competently directed. They've got great soundtracks. I thought the Blu-rays look fine. The original Blu-ray is an MPEG 2. At times it looked like a bad YouTube video. Where the second Blu-ray, which the movie was from 2007, but the Blu-ray came out later, was an MPEG 4. And both soundtracks were good, lossless. I thought it was not bad for a kind of retro viewing experience that they were. These movies haven't been released in 4K, and I don't know that Fox ever will, because they're moving on from these characters. But I thought Chris Evans was spectacular in both movies. I thought Kerry Washington was spectacular in both movies, and I think everybody else gave it their best shot, including Jessica Alba, but she sticks out like a sore thumb every time I watch the movies. She's just not Sue Storm. They had to dye her hair and dye her eyebrows, and even if they didn't care about the character being blonde or whatever, she just is not Sue Storm, much as she tried. I think she played the script and the role fine. It just was what it was. So these two movies are going to get forgotten. I found that actually they're not really easy to buy these days. You can find used copies everywhere. I actually was missing a copy of Rise of the Silver Surfer, and I found it locally really cheap for about $1.99. I think it was still sealed, too. They didn't do digital copies back then. But rewatching them, it's kind of like what I said about that bad Hellboy movie I watched recently. If you're a fan of Marvel, if you're a fan of Fantastic Four, like if you're a fan of Hellboy, consider this 2 more issues of many stories. These are 2 issues, probably not your favorite author or your favorite inker or your favorite scripter or whatever, but they're fine, and they fit in the pantheon of pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe Marvel movies, and they give you a little background on one way to view the Fantastic Four. So in rewatching them, I was like, wow, I really wasn't looking forward to it. But after watching the first one, I'm like, that wasn't really bad. Let's watch the next one. And again, Julian McMahon, it's sad that he passed away at such a young age. I think he was great in the roles he was in. And he was a pretty good Dr. Doom. Not bad. It'll be interesting to see what Robert Downey Jr. does with the role. But anyway, I thought the original 2, the 2005 and 2007 Fantastic Four movies, are fine for what they are. They might get a 2.5 out of 5. First one might get almost a 3 out of 5 for me, but they are what they are, and they're kind of a bookmark and a time capsule for a time when we were still getting that whole superhero balance right. In the best years of the Marvel Universe, they got superhero movies right. Christopher Nolan movies are that's exceptional and not the rule. They're the exception to the rule. Whereas Marvel, for a long run, got the comic thing right. Now they're a little all over the place, but I'd rather them do that than keep putting out cookie cutter stuff. So after the Thunderbolts, I'm looking forward to the next Fantastic Four. And I got to say, the casting on this upcoming movie, fantastic. They nailed it. Hopefully the movie is as good as the casting because it looks spectacular. Anyway, the original 2 movies are available now on streaming services, and you can get them on Blu-ray if you can find them. They're fine, but not my favorite superhero movies of all time. But you might enjoy them, especially if you're a Fantastic Four fan. You can see how we did it before we could do what we're about to do later on this month. I'm Scott, I'm ROCKFILE. More podcasts are on the way. Thank you for liking, sharing, and please subscribe. Turns out like over 90% of the people that watch here, at least on my YouTube channel, are not subscribed. They just find it. So it'd be great if you could subscribe, especially on YouTube. Have a spectacular day, and thanks for listening.